want to be the clinical director or the clinical leader. So often it's, I'll take it for now, but that's one of the first things I want off my plate. The truth that I see that nobody wants to talk about is there's a lack of clinical leadership systems, and that dentist-to-dentist relationship is really tough.
I am so excited for today's episode. Before we get into the meat of that, though, we have our Ask Ken segment. Here's the question that came in, and I'll share my answer. So the question is, if I'm a dentist owner and my team keeps showing me reports that I don't understand, what's the one report I should demand each month to keep it simple so that I can have a very simple way of understanding how my business is doing? I love this question, and it is going to be different than anybody expects because there's really actually only one metric that matters net at the end of the day, and that is, are you generating cash in your business or are you burning or consuming cash in your business? And the place where you can determine if, where you're at with this is on the statement of cash flows. And on that statement of cash flows, there's a very simple little place where you can look at cash from operations. You subtract your CapEx, and that tells you if you're positive or negative in terms of cash generation or cash burning, so to speak. That would be the one number. It might be a little difficult for your team to find because a lot of times if you're on a cash basis of accounting, you aren't generating a statement of cash flow where you can go and find that information. But to the degree you have access to that is the number one once a month best number. And I think, Josey, you had mentioned that coming on that you thought maybe you wanted to lob a question in here. So let's go for it.
Yeah, I thought the Ask Ken section was maybe for me. So I came with a bunch of questions, but I'll pick two. I'll pick one serious and one fun. And what I love about this podcast, Ken, is that it's called the Dental Truth Project and that you are calling out things that maybe nobody else wants to talk about. And you're bringing that to the forefront. And I think that takes a lot of courage. So my question, the harder question I'll ask before the simpler one is, what is the one thing that you know or that you've seen that nobody's actually willing to admit about the rise of dental groups and consolidation?
Loaded question. And by the way, I love loaded questions. That means we're going to get some fun answers here. But the fact that so much emphasis is put on private equity and selling and EBITDA and all of these different things, I think that it's become too much of the focus. And I think that we are missing the bigger picture and the broader point. And I think we're sacrificing the future of dentistry because we're so focused on these things and how do we monetize our business and how do we sell it for the highest multiple, when at the end of the day, in fact, there will be a podcast episode that comes out shortly where somebody literally says that if you pick the buyer that is paying the most likely you're going to bankrupt that organization moving forward. And because it's happened over and over again. And so I just think that, that piece of the puzzle is interesting, but a massive distraction to what actually drives value in dentistry. That's my answer.
Love hearing that from you, Ken. You and I have even been on stage together talking about growing and selling and EBITDA and multiples and things like that. And I just think that that's such a valuable lesson from those who have, seen various different parts of it. So thanks for sharing that. I think that takes a lot of courage. All right, Ken, if your life had an annual report, what would the headline and cover page say this year?
Oh my gosh. Did you use Chat GPT for this? Where's this coming?
I did use some help with chat, but I did come up with some of my own and then had some help. But yeah, this one was a good one.
So my headline for this, I don't know how else to say it other than just growth. And it doesn't mean that necessarily my business has grown as much as I hoped or wanted. It's just been a great year of growth and learning and experiencing. I am a better person as a result of what's happened this year, but there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of struggle that is included there. But I don't know. You know me well enough, Josey, to know I'm a glutton for punishment, and I tend to run toward those opportunities to learn / pain.
Yeah, you're an entrepreneur, right? And it's like, what do they say about entrepreneurs? They will trade the 40 hours a week for 80 hours a week when you get to do what you want to do and you're passionate about and to build something new. And I've met so many entrepreneurs that once they've built the thing and it's cash flow positive and it's profitable, they almost get bored. So yeah, there's something inside of us that we're all, many of us who are entrepreneurs, like that pain and that growth and that learning. And it's been so fun. Vulnerably, you'll share in conversation with me in the mastermind that we're in, or even just on LinkedIn. And it's been super fun to get to know Dallin and see you two working together and navigating that dynamic of father and son, but also business partners. So I just love what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a fun ride and great growth opportunity for sure. All right. Should we get to it? You came
Let's
here.
get to it.
We are about telling the truth, especially about the things that the industry doesn't talk about very much. And so, Josey, what is it that you're showing up with today? Well, and take a second and just introduce yourself in case, I don't know who doesn't know Josey, but just in case there's somebody out there that doesn't, let's just give them a little bit of info and then let's jump into your truth.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'm Josey Sewell. My background is as a clinical dental hygienist who then jumped into consulting, learned the business part of dentistry, and then was an executive in a dental group. I sat in various different seats. As an executive, I was a director of hygiene, then a director of culture, director of operations, and then a COO. Got to help take that group to market and see what life before the deal and after the deal was like. Exited and moved to Utah. Worked at Dental Intel as a VP of education for a short little while, but COVID had me really thinking about who I was and what I wanted to be. And I think at my core, I'm a coach and I love coaching and supporting others. So for the last 5 years, have been doing a lot of coaching with dental groups and DSOs, helping them implement a business operating system. But now Eric Roman and I are partnered together and we have Dental Associate Growth, where we are helping dental associates find more joy, fulfillment, and productivity inside and outside the operatory, and then helping their clinical leaders implement the systems to help take care of their associates, because we know that so much of the revenue in a dental group is dependent on associates, but there's not a lot of great systems in place to take care of them. So the dental truth that I want to talk about is the lack of clinical leadership that I see inside dental groups and DSOs. You know, being somebody that has helped literally hundreds of companies build an org chart and create their organizational structure, what happens is we'll get in there and we talk about revenue cycle management, and we'll talk about marketing and finance and who's going to sit in a visionary seat, and who's going to sit in an operations seat. And there's a lot of excitement. And then usually there's a pause and there's a little bit of silence in the room. And they'll turn to me and say, "Hey, Josey, are we missing anything? What else do other successful dental groups have that we haven't accounted for?" And I'll say, "Well, we are in dentistry, and your revenue is dependent on both dentists and hygienists, and yet we don't have somebody who's acting as a clinical leader. So who needs to sit in this clinical leader chair, right? Or this seat, whether it's a chief dental officer or a dental director, there's so many names. But what is that department?" And often people are a little bit reluctant, like, "Oh yeah, I guess you're right. We probably do need to figure that out." And we'll build the seat, right? What the position is, maybe what the KPIs are. But when it gets time to actually having somebody take that seat, it's often that there's one, maybe two people in the room that are capable of being that, being a dentist or the owner. And yet I've never had the experience in all of the times that I do this that a hand immediately is raised that says, "I want that job. I want to be the clinical director or the clinical leader." So often it's, "I'll take it for now, but that's one of the first things I want off my plate." And so I see that there is this struggle with dentist to dentist relationships. I see that the clinical director or owner might be really involved in recruiting, but after they get that contract signed, it's like they don't want to have conversations with their dentist. They don't want to engage with them. And the other thing that I'll say is there's this false belief that dentists don't need to be managed. Yet, while yes, they went to dental school, they are a dentist, they have doctor in front of their name, they paid a lot of money to do this, they are also human beings that need clear expectations and need mentorship and guidance and support and know what their guardrails are. And so I would say the truth that I see that nobody wants to talk about is there's a lack of clinical leadership systems, and that dentist to dentist relationship is really tough.
Interesting. So what is it then? Because I've seen this before where a dentist might be brilliant, yet going and talking to another dentist about clinical work or even more intense for them having somebody review their work, and look at their notes and go through that process. Why is it that this is the case? If you put two CPAs in the room, they're going to totally look at each other's stuff and beat each other up over, you messed this up, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. Like, they do not hesitate to give feedback to each other. And a lot of other venues, like, they don't hesitate. Why is it that in dentistry, why don't doctors talk, and why don't they compare notes, and why don't they give feedback back and forth? What is it, do you think, that causes that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I've tried to ask many of them, like, hey, I see you in the meeting with your executive team, and you are direct and you are bold and you hold people to expectations, but you can't do that with your doctors. Why? Tell me where the gap is. And sometimes they're like, well, I don't know. It just feels a little bit more peer to peer. And so that seems really tough. And I don't know if many of them are also like, well, I'm not like the world's best dentist. I'm not a perfect dentist. I'm a pretty good dentist. And so they don't think that what they know and have in their head and in their knowledge, they assume that other dentists also know all of those things. And that's maybe like a big gap, is they don't recognize or realize how much they truly understand more information that they have that would be valuable, especially to a young dentist who's learning their way, or a dentist struggling with performance. So it's this like really funny thing that it's like, I assume that what I know, you know, so why would I have anything of value to offer you? And I think that that's where one of the big gaps is not realizing how much knowledge and expertise they do have and how they can share that. And I also think that it's a little bit about not wanting to make another dentist feel bad, or not even sure how to engage the conversation. Just like dentists were not taught how to be business owners, they also weren't taught how to be a mentor to somebody else or a coach to somebody else. And so navigating that conversation can sometimes feel a little bit difficult. And I also imagine that maybe what's hard is that when you have a dentist that's a wrong fit dentist, whether they're struggling with performance or they're struggling with core values, we know the cost of hiring a new dentist and the effort to find them is so massive that sometimes they probably feel a little bit hostage. Like, oh, I can't tell this dentist that their crown margins are terrible, because is it worth for me to suffer that, that ill performance rather than find a new dentist? And so that may be it, is that they feel a little bit hostage. But I don't know, Ken, do you have any thoughts on maybe why that relationship is such a struggle?
This one baffles me. I don't know. What I do know is that associates coming out of school generally want and they need mentorship. Yes. Because, the reps in the chair in dental school aren't that much. And so they come out with good knowledge and good information, but not really knowing how to practice dentistry in, let's say it's a high producing practice, and there's a lot of patients coming in, and, just even learning how to sit chairside with the patient and talk to them in a way that's helpful and meaningful and doesn't scare them, but also doesn't leave them lacking for information and wondering what in the world just happened in an interaction, right? And so, from my perspective, on the clinical side, there are a bunch of different areas. Like, it's not just about doing dentistry. There's so many other pieces of the puzzle in order to make it come together. I'm curious, would you see dentists willing to kind of coach each other more on some of those things versus the actual clinical work? Or is it pretty much just across the board, they don't like to give each other feedback?
No, I think that you're right. I don't want to miss the point that associates are associates because they want the feedback. And they need the feedback, and they are anxious for it. They're hungry for it. And those who are hiring associates need to just know that that's the job, right? When you bring on an associate, they're looking for your feedback. And chances are you sold them on some type of mentorship as being part of your company. And so now you have to hold up your end of the bargain, or else they feel betrayed. They feel like you've lied to them. So yes, I think that you're right. I think part of it is maybe people just don't know how to coach on whether it's clinical or chairside skills or case acceptance skills. I don't know if you've experienced this, Ken, but I find that there are a couple of different kinds of people in the world. And this is like very oversimplifying and overgeneralizing. There are really, really high performers that can go and do the things well, but it's almost like they don't know how to take a step back and codify what it is that they're doing or put a process to what they're doing. And so they don't even know where to start. And then there are those who can be simplifiers and system builders. And so what we're talking about right now with everybody that we're working with and every stage we have the opportunity to be a part of is you need two things. You need a recipe and you need a rhythm. And so that recipe is, what are those things that create success inside your business? Is that a certain way that patients are treated? Is that your financial arrangement? Is that your treatment planning process? What are those things that you know, if you predictably will do them again and again and again, can provide results? And keep it very simple. And then what is the rhythm of follow-up, right? How am I consistently coming back, meeting with my associates, evaluating their performance, checking in on them emotionally and mentally, and then how do we make sure that we're following this recipe? So I think that people just don't have a formula, and maybe that's part of it. And I've seen when some people have a formula, they can take and just run with it, right? They've got the recipe and the rhythm, and that seems to give them a lot of what they were lacking because it's intimidating to know where to start.
Got it. Yeah, because perhaps the one thing that's worse than just doing nothing at all in terms of coaching people on the clinical side, perhaps the one thing that's worse than that is doing it once and then not having the rhythm to keep track of it. And then they're like, well, wait a minute, what just happened to this? I thought I had a friend. I thought I had somebody who could maybe give me some feedback or some help here. And they just left me hanging.
Absolutely. That consistency is where most people struggle. They have got great ideas or great training, but they don't come back and follow through because they're, either putting out a new fire or they've got a new idea. So yeah, that consistency and follow through is often where I see people struggle.
Interesting. So one of the takeaways here then in my mind that I'm thinking about is because consistency has no cost associated with it. It takes very little effort in terms of just like showing up and being consistent. And I've just found this in life. This is true for people in clinical roles as well as just anything else in life. Man, if you can be consistent, you generally can outlast just about anybody else in the room or outside of the room or anything else. So that's an interesting takeaway. I hadn't connected those two so succinctly before, but that makes a ton of sense. Just the consistency, whether you're a bad coach or a good coach, it doesn't even matter that much. It's about, are you consistently showing up and engaging?
Yeah. And what we have also found that's been so interesting is one of the things I feel like I'm personally gifted at is taking a concept or an idea and creating a development pathway. Like, what would be the curriculum that somebody would learn this? What would be the learning path? How do we achieve mastery over time? And I love creating training and content. I love things like adult learning theory. I enjoy that so much. But I will tell you that what we have found in working with over 100 associates over the last year and their leaders is that one, we lack consistency, but also we're lacking basic fundamental recurrent training in dentistry. And so if you think about a paramedic, you think about military, you think about a pilot, you think about different people in positions like that, what is their training for their job? It's recurrent training, right? It's going back to the checklist and doing it step by step. And so what does that tell us? That tells us that when life is on the line, the repetition and consistency matters so that when we're in the heat of the battle, we know what to do. And yet we don't have that for dentistry. What is the equivalent of CPR training for the paramedic? What is the equivalent of the dribbling and the passing and the shooting for a basketball player? And we have found that sometimes the most simple content, things like how to do a really good handoff, how to be really consistent and give a great experience during an exam, making sure you're doing recare exams. How does a dentist prepare for the day? How do we make sure our team is on the same page? There are some really fundamental recurrent things that we've been doing with associates, and we have found when we nail those fundamentals and have them come back to it every quarter, we see their performance dramatically improve over time. And once they nail that, they can add on things like implants or ortho or things like that. But we're missing some of that very basic recurrent training. And maybe that's also tough for a clinical leader to they're so close to it, they may not realize what some of the foundational things are that they need to be drilling and simulating and doing with their team over and over and over again.
So I know that you're familiar with the framework of study clubs, right? Dentists and professionals of all kinds have been doing this study club where they'll look at a case and talk it through. And one of the dentists will be vulnerable and say, this is the case I did. It didn't go so well, or it went great. But there's comments and feedback about that. How much of sort of the concept of the study club, how much of that do you think can apply over to helping associates from a training and a growth perspective?
Love study clubs, especially internal, like just one company study clubs with their associates. I would say maybe part of what made us very, very successful as a dental group was once a month on the second Tuesday of the month at 7:00. I mean, it's been 6 years since I've been there, right? And I still know when the meeting is. We had a once a month doctor meeting where we would bring our doctors together. They would have a meal together. They'd get to socialize, and then we would do a study club. So sometimes we would bring in a speaker that may be training on our implant or our endo system, but oftentimes we would have a doctor bring a case, or we would drill some of our foundational information, give company updates and things like that. And it created this camaraderie with our dentists so that when somebody went on maternity leave, another doctor from a location was more willing to jump in and help. Or they figured out and they knew who was good at what and who was passionate about what. They started to refer to each other for things they didn't want to do. And it made it so nobody was afraid to say, I'm struggling, or I don't know how to do this, or I want to get better. And that did allow other things to work well, whether it was our quality assurance committee who was reviewing their cases, or if it was a doctor struggling clinically, they had people come in and help and support. So I am a huge advocate of regular meetings. I mean, we have one client that his dentist meeting cadence is every other week on a Friday morning for 30 minutes. And that works well for them. Some people might do every other month, whether it's Zoom or in person. But no, I am a huge advocate for getting your dentist together and for doing those things, reviewing cases, but also just, again, that recurrent training, company updates, and allow them to grow together. And I think dentists really appreciate and like being surrounded by other dentists. They like talking about dentist things. So I'm a huge advocate for that.
Yeah. Yeah. The two terms that came to mind as you were talking there were peer groups. And those have been successful since the beginning of everything. And the other one is I could see that a group that's really trying to do this the right way could actually create kind of a mastermind structure around these meetings as well that allows for the back and forth and feedback, and a lot of self-reflection and growth, and it all serves toward this concept of, because they say you're only as smart or you're only as good as the 5 people you spend the most time with. And you can look around, and in one of these large DSOs, there's going to be probably a clinician that you might look up to, and an opportunity to network with them or connect with them and be in a mastermind with them in some form or fashion. I can see that could really, really help from a training perspective.
Absolutely. It also training and culture, but also, you know what? It helped us was for recruiting. So what we did is we often would recruit from a local VA residency. So we would officially host the residency twice a year, one in the fall. And in the fall, we would talk to them more about like clinical dentistry, give them a tour of our offices and have them attend a meeting. And then we would do one in the spring. And the spring was more, hey, you're getting ready to look for a job. Here's what a group looks like. Here's what a single practice looks like. Here, like it was adding value to them, not just like trying to sell them on our company, but adding value to them. But we would allow them to come to one of these meetings and we would say, hey, this happens every month. If you just want to stop by and come and join us, you're more than welcome to. And they were like, wait a minute, you would let me do that? And we were like, yeah, absolutely, come and join us. So they might come and attend. So by the time that it came around, they were graduating residency, we were looking for new doctors. They were fighting to be part of our company because they had interacted with us and seen the emphasis that we had put on our dentist culture and on their performance and on their growth. So yeah, I think that those can be really, really valuable meetings to have regularly.
Yeah, that's fascinating that ultimately, if you do it right and you build out the clinical program correctly, you can give exposure to D2s, D3s, D4s, and build a relationship with them over time, and then give them the opportunity when they are finished up with school and trying to figure out where they're going to go next. I mean, some may go to residency or whatever, but yeah, that's a really fascinating way to think about it, because coming out of school, I've never been a dentist, but I think it would be terrifying to come out of school and try to figure out where you should go. And now people are putting these associate agreements in front of you, and you have no idea what any of the language in these things mean and how they all work. And to me, I think there's a lot of opportunity for dental groups to be thinking ahead and doing some of these things where you're connecting with folks who are potentially going to be interested at some point in time about, your practice and them joining. So
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of that before, but that's brilliant.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I mean, I remember the fear of going from being a hygiene student to a hygienist. And I remember walking my first patient out, and I was like, okay, they're all done. You can set them up for next time. And they were like, well, did you do a prophy or did you do perio maintenance? And I was like, well, what do you mean? I got them cleaned up. My school was incredible, but I did not understand the difference between a prophy code and a perio maintenance code. I knew how to probe, I knew how to clean around those 4 and 5 millimeter pockets, but I didn't know I was supposed to charge any different if it was, if there was deeper pockets or bleeding or whatever. And so I remember just being like, what do you mean? I don't know what you mean. And so I can't imagine what that would be like with such a larger scope of practice and being a dentist. To the point, they need mentoring, they need support, they need some of the most obvious information that you don't even realize that they need, like the basics of insurance or coding or charging things out.
Yeah. Brilliant. This has been amazing. We're going to need to wrap up here, but any last thoughts that you have about what we've talked about today and how this dental truth needs to be elevated?
Yes, I would say that if the future of your company is dependent on associates, then you need to really think about what it means to be a clinical leader. You need to lead and manage your dentist well, and that deserves your time, your attention, your effort, even more so than some of the things that may be required from an operational perspective, because nobody can lead hygienist and dentist quite like another hygienist or dentist can. And it is literally the future of your company. And so, yes, it's painful and maybe it's a little bit awkward, but it is so worth it. And the last thing I'll say is that the other team member that absolutely is going to need your awareness and your focus is, I am sadly seeing, Ken, that a lot of our female associates are being bullied by the team. And so it's this difficult, female to female relationship. I've had probably 8 to 10 one-on-one calls with female associates in the last 6 weeks. Every single one of them has ended up in tears because they have a hygienist or a dental assistant that is making life miserable, but they have the ear of the office manager or the clinical director, and they're often just being kind of pushed off to the side or brushed off, and they deserve to have a voice at the table. But it's also really intimidating for them to know, how do I tell my boss that their dental assistants are kind of running the show and making my life miserable? So it's more common than we know about, and it's just something that not a lot of people know how to engage because it is a tough situation. So take great care of your associates and help, especially your female dentist, integrate with the other females in the practice and establish some good team culture to make sure that everybody's taking care of everybody.
Wow. Amazing. And doing that ahead of time.
Yes.
And just getting out ahead of it before it can even become a thing. That's it's brilliant. Awesome.
Yeah, don't throw them in there seeing patients on day one. Give them time to integrate.
Awesome. So much great information here, Josey. Can't thank you enough. That's it for today's episode of Dental Truth Project. Josey Sewell is our amazing guest today. Thank you for sharing all of your insights and thoughts in this area, which is so critical to the future of dentistry. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We have a new episode that drops every Wednesday morning. I'm Ken Kaufman, and until next time, keep seeking the truth that helps dentistry thrive. Happy day.